And of course, the appendix here contains the scriptural proof of when God's kingdom began to rule in 1914.
The scores of branch office buildings, hundreds of assembly halls, and tens of thousands of kingdom halls around the world provide tangible proof that God's kingdom is ruling. None of this would be possible without Jehovah's blessing.
Jehovah has blessed his people, and there's tangible proof of that blessing.
And it is proof. The reality of this spiritual paradise is proof that a literal paradise will likewise soon become reality.
Proof, tangible proof, concrete evidence.
What a powerful proof.
This is overwhelming proof.
Is proof positive?
Is proof that we are living in the conclusion of the system of things.
It's just another proof that Jehovah is with the governing body.
I hear someone ask, what do they know? Wrong question. I think the right question is, what does Jehovah know? It comes down to this, friends. Do I really believe that Jehovah is directing this organization today? Do I believe that Jehovah will give insight to his faithful people?
Those are excellent questions, Brother Splain. We'll get back to you shortly. The Enjoy Life Forever publication urges Jehovah's Witnesses to take a closer look at their history. If you are a witness, please follow this direction. Examine the history and origins of your organization and its doctrines. In a moment, we'll take a look at just some examples when Jehovah's Witnesses said they had conclusive proof, evidence, or facts about a prophecy, but still ended up being completely wrong. But let's first address this box on the same page. It states, occasionally we have adjusted some of our beliefs. Why? Just as the rising sun reveals details of a landscape gradually, God grants an understanding of His Word progressively. So although the Bible does not change, we adjust our beliefs as our understanding of the Bible improves. To use the word occasionally grossly misrepresents how often doctrine is changed within the organization. Jehovah's Witnesses use words such as adjusted, clarified, and refined to describe their doctrinal flip-flops. It's true that Jehovah's Witnesses keep a curated list of changes on their website. Just going off their own list, does this look like occasionally to you? Let's look at one example listed. Regarding 1914, the October 15th, 1990 Watchtower stated, "For 38 years prior to 1914, the Bible students, as Jehovah's Witnesses were then called, pointed to that date as the year when the Gentile times would end. What outstanding proof that is that they were true servants of Jehovah. How is that proof, especially considering the latter part of the same paragraph, which continues, yet, like first-century servants of God, they also had some wrong expectations. For example, they expected that the full number of anointed Christians would be raised to heaven by October 1914. They also thought that the war that started in 1914 would lead directly on to the end of Satan's world. Yes, for decades they believed Armageddon would come in 1914. They also believed Christ's second presence began in 1874 and that he began ruling as king in 1878. Notice how they also tried to compare themselves to first-century servants of God. But did those first-century servants dogmatically preach these false expectations? Or did they merely ask Jesus, the apostles, or the older men of the congregation questions? Did those first-century servants shun or disfellowship others that didn't believe what a select few expected would happen? Do you see the false equivalencies Watchtower makes? Remember, Jehovah's Witnesses are supposedly the one true religion that Jesus Christ handpicked in 1919. So why would their understanding of doctrine be just as poor and finicky as so-called Christendom's? Look at this April 22nd, 1970 article of The Wake, where they criticized the Catholic Church because of changes to their doctrine. In the article, Changes That Disturb People, it stated, "One of the reasons is that people are disturbed by what is happening in their churches. Yes, millions of persons have been shocked to learn that things they were taught as being vital for salvation are now considered by their church to be wrong. Have you, too, felt discouragement or even despair because of what is happening in your church? A businessman in Medellin, Colombia, expressed the effect the changes have had on many. "Tell me," he asked, "how can I have confidence in anything? How can I believe in the Bible, in God, or have faith? Just 10 years ago, we Catholics had the absolute truth. We put all our faith in this. Now the Pope and our priests are telling us this is not the way to believe anymore, but we are to believe new things. How do I know the new things will be the truth in 5 years?" If you are a Catholic, can you understand how a practice that was considered by the Church a mortal sin can suddenly be approved? If it was a sin 5 years ago, why is it not today? Many Catholics cannot understand. As they're pointing fingers at other religions, listen to what governing body member Samuel Hurd says about their own.
Because sometimes we have to make adjustments. Now, you may have heard of a few adjustments in our understanding of things already today, and there could be more adjustments that will have to be made later on. Now, you may recall that we used to think a certain way some 10 years ago about the following matter. But as we understand it, some things Jehovah will not permit us to see, even though we read over it many, many times. We can't see it until Jehovah puts the light on it.
Can you see their hypocrisy? JW Facts has a 141-page document containing doctrinal changes and flip-flops of the organization. That's not even a complete list of changes, and it hasn't been updated in the past 7 years, where even more changes have occurred. I'll have a link in the description if you're interested. Would you consider this as occasionally changing beliefs? The paragraph also directs readers to Proverbs 4 verse 18. We discussed that scripture in a previous video, explaining how the context of those verses clearly indicates it wasn't a prophecy and didn't relate to doctrine at all, and how the concept of increasing light doesn't turn one thing into something completely different, but rather just increases the detail of what was already present. Please give that video a watch if you haven't yet. Link is in the description. We'll look at just a few examples of where Jehovah's Witnesses have used the phrases proof conclusive, facts, and evidence in the past, and how they all ended up being false prophecies. And importantly, what it means when you hear similar lines of reasoning from the governing body today. Let's go back to Brother David Splain as he introduces the publication we'll look at next.
But what else happened in 1919? What provision did Jehovah make for these people? The faithful and discreet slave was appointed in that same year. And the slave didn't waste any time to start producing literature that was going to make it easier for people to come into the truth. 1919, the slave is appointed. By 1921, you have a brand new publication, The Harp of God.
Since the governing body urged us in the Enjoy Life Forever book to look at its history, let's look at the Harp of God that Splain so proudly mentioned brought people into the so-called truth. The Harp of God was first printed way back in 1921, over 100 years ago. Yet Jehovah's Witnesses today still proudly bring up that publication as part of their theocratic history. Notice in this picture, they purposefully use an edition where the front cover doesn't include proof conclusive that millions now living will never die. Please note that the Harp of God was revised again in 1928. You can tell which version it is by the front cover, but we'll look at the 1921 version since that's what Splain referenced. Right on the inside cover, before we even get into the book, there's already a statement that turned out to be 100% wrong. And they're proud of this book, as though its age proves the legitimacy of the organization. This won't be a deep dive, but here are just some examples of the so-called spiritual truths this book taught. Napoleon began this Egyptian campaign in 1798, and being completed in 1799 marks, according to the prophet's own words, the beginning of the time of the end. 1260 years from AD 539 brings us to 1799, another proof that 1799 definitely marks the beginning of the time of the end. The railway train has been in use less than 100 years, and yet the prophet of God many centuries ago gave a clear and particular description of the railway train and the manner of its operation, and prophesied that the same would be in vogue at the time of the end, at the time the Lord is making preparation for the establishment of his kingdom. And he also foretold that at that time there would be a great running to and fro by other means of transportation, such as automobiles, electric cars, etc. The understanding of the prophecies with reference to the time of the end and the Lord's presence was purposely concealed by Jehovah until the due time. Daniel desired to know what would be the end of these things, but God said to him, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end." They still use the same excuse today. But why would God reveal something to them when it was his due time, but then change what was revealed to them later on? Does that make sense to you? They also believed the locomotive and telegraph were considered fulfillments of the day of God's preparation. They claimed it was evidence and fact. In Nahum 2 verse 1-6, the prophet records his vision of a railway train traveling at a high rate of speed as another evidence of the day of preparation for the establishment of Christ's kingdom. In 1844, the telegraph was invented, and later the telephone. These instruments were first used with wires, and by electricity, messages were conveyed throughout the earth. But now by later invention, wires are dispensed with, and messages are flashed through the air by the use of instruments all over the earth. This great increase of knowledge and the tremendous running to and fro of the people in various parts of the earth, without question is a fulfillment of the prophecy testifying as to the time of the end. These physical facts cannot be disputed, and are sufficient to convince any reasonable mind that we have been in the time of the end since 1799. Look at what else they claimed was evidence that the Lord's presence commenced in 1874. Adding machines, aeroplanes, aluminum, antiseptic surgery, artificial dyes, automatic couplers, automobiles, barbed wire, bicycles, carborundum, cash registers, celluloid, correspondence schools, cream separators, darkest Africa, fireless cookers, shoe sewing machines, the telegraph, the telephone, Panama Canal, pasteurization, and vacuum cleaners. I bet you won't look at a vacuum cleaner the same way again, right? After all, it's evidence of Christ's presence. And here's an ad for the book, Daily Heavenly Manna and Birthday Record, scriptural commentary with a birthday calendar, so you'll never forget your loved one's birthday. Here's a nice picture of Jesus on the cross. Yes, they still believe Jesus died on a cross in this book. Remember, they claim Jesus selected the organization in 1919, and this book came out in 1921. If you want to read the publication, you can sign out a free digital copy at archive.org. I'll have links in the description. The Harp of God wasn't the only publication that made the Millions Now Living statement. Rutherford gave that talk alongside the release of the booklet, Millions Now Living Will Never Die. What's surprising, though, is that as recently as 1997, they doubled down on that teaching. The January 1st, 1997 Watchtower wrote, "In the early 1920s, a featured public talk presented by Jehovah's Witnesses was entitled, 'Millions Now Living Will Never Die.' This may have reflected over-optimism at that time, but today that statement can be made with full confidence. Both the increasing light on Bible prophecy and the anarchy of this dying world cry out that the end of Satan's system is very, very near." That didn't age well at all. Since their interpretation of the generation prophecy failed spectacularly, the governing body concocted the overlapping generation teaching. This pushed out the deadline for Armageddon by decades and left the mess and responsibility of creating new light again in the hands of whoever happens to be on the governing body at that time. Let's continue on to this Awake article, which stated, If you are a young person, you also need to face the fact that you will never grow old in this present system of things. Why not? Because all the evidence and fulfillment of Bible prophecy indicates that this corrupt system is due to end in a few years. Of the generation that observed the beginning of the last days in 1914, Jesus foretold, "This generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur." Therefore, as a young person, you will never fulfill any career that this system offers. If you are in high school and thinking about a college education, it means at least 4, perhaps even 6 or 8 more years to graduate into a specialized career. But where will this system of things be by that time? It will be well on the way toward its finish, if not actually gone. Notice the words fact and evidence, and the use of definitive statements such as how young ones will never fulfill a career that is in this system. Some viewers may remember when this article came out. For those of you that don't, take a guess what year this was published. This article was written in 1969, over 54 years ago. If you were 10 years old when that article came out, you're close to retiring, if not retired already. I have a deep dive into this generation doctrine. The video link is in the description. In the coming months and years, you'll hear more about judgment messages, the Great Tribulation, and persecution from the witnesses. These are designed to inspire fear and keep you on the treadmill. People who are afraid are easier to control and manipulate. We've briefly looked at just a few times the Jehovah's Witnesses stated assuredly that they had proof, told us to face the facts, or that we can have full confidence in one of their teachings, and they were all unequivocally and completely wrong. Why would it be any different today when they already have a 140-year track record of failed predictions? But you may ask, have the Jehovah's Witnesses addressed all the times they were wrong about something? Besides their curated list of clarified beliefs, they have. Let's look at the March 22nd, 1993 Awake under the heading, Why So Many False Alarms? Jehovah's Witnesses, in their eagerness for Jesus' second coming, have suggested dates that turned out to be incorrect. Because of this, some have called them false prophets. Never in these instances, however, did they presume to originate predictions in the name of Jehovah. Never did they say, "These are the words of Jehovah." Wow, can you believe that? So, if any of their statements aren't prefaced by, "These are the words of Jehovah," they want to be completely absolved of any responsibility for getting it wrong. But let's see what Jehovah's Witnesses have written from the 1900s to present day. From the April 1st, 1932 Watchtower, "The Sovereign Lord giveth the word." The expression "the word," therefore, includes every revelation of truth, down to and including the book of Vindication, and whatsoever shall be revealed and published, by the Lord's grace, as long as the remnant is on earth. From the first book of Vindication, the servant is not to tell his own message. Jehovah has made his faithful servant the watchman, and only as the Lord God directs the servant to speak, he does speak, having always a "Thus saith the Lord" for every part of the message that is delivered. The work of the servant is not to make converts to get them to join an organization, but to give a witness to the truth. November 1st, 1931 Watchtower said, "The Watchtower is not the instrument of any man or set of men, nor is it published according to the whims of men. No man's opinion is expressed in the Watchtower. God feeds his own people, and surely God uses those who love and serve him according to his own will." The June 15, 1957 Watchtower wrote, "It is vital that we appreciate this fact and respond to the directions of the slave as we would to the voice of God, because it is his provision." Closer to our day, the August 15, 2014 Watchtower wrote, "Today, Jehovah guides his people by means of the Bible, his Holy Spirit, and the congregation. The guidance that we receive from him is so clear that it is as if our own ears hear a word behind us saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.' In effect, Jesus also conveys Jehovah's voice to us as he directs the congregation through the Faithful and Discreet Slave. We need to take this guidance and direction seriously, for our everlasting life depends on our obedience. The February 2022 Watchtower stated, "Today Jehovah leads the earthly part of his organization. By means of the Faithful and Discreet Slave, we show that we trust in Jehovah's way of doing things by heeding the direction we receive from the organization and the elders."
The governing body could be likened to the voice of Jesus, the head of the congregation. So when we willingly submit to the faithful slave, we're ultimately submitting to Jesus' authority and direction.
And what I'm about to reveal to you today, Jehovah is behind it. Not the governing body, not any human here on the earth, but Jehovah God. He helps us to see things.
So despite claiming they never prefaced any prophecies or predictions by saying, "These are the words of Jehovah," they fully expect everything that comes from the organization to be obeyed as though it were. Do you see how they want it both ways? The governing body wants to be obeyed as though it's God's mouthpiece, and at the same time not be responsible for all the false predictions and doctrine flip-flops. Does that sound honest to you?
We are not embarrassed about adjustments that are made, nor is an apology needed for not getting it exactly right previously. We understand this is how Jehovah operates. He reveals matters gradually when it is needed. And also, the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible, and so it can err in doctrinal matters or in organizational direction. The brothers do the best they can with what they have and what they understand at the time, but are happy if Jehovah sees fit to clarify matters, and then that can be shared with the brotherhood. And when that happens, we understand it's because it's Jehovah's time for that to happen, and we eagerly accept that.
Do all the failed doctrines they once claimed was fact or had conclusive proof point to the governing body being directed by God? Why would they change time-sensitive doctrines only after the date passed? Why wouldn't they have this adjustment, clarification, or refinement beforehand? Does that sound like God is leading the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses? So please, give yourself permission to look at the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, read the actual publications they reference, and don't be content with cover shots that hide the ugly truth within. And honestly ask yourself the questions that governing body member Splain asked.
Do I really believe that Jehovah is directing this organization today? Do I believe that Jehovah will give insight to his faithful people so they can remain in the land of the living, as the psalmist said?
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. I wanted to give a shout out to the Piper, OddBirdie99, and JWFacts.com. Special thanks to Dave Sturgeon, an anonymous supporter, for buying me coffee. Also to Eli Tyler, Evan Wyndham, Mousegeek, and Eric Hensley67 for the YouTube super thanks. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.